But hey, everyone, hi. We're gonna roll the intro in a second. But I was just saying about nostalgia and stuff, and I tend to be not a nostalgic person. Like when I look back on things, I tend to see the present stuff that I have is like the best, sort of. But I do, of course, everyone in crypto has like early Bitcoin days nostalgia when it was just like crypto was just about the peer-to-peer cash and everyone was super excited about it and like, oh my gosh, we got them to take Bitcoin, this is great. And then every time, like I kind of felt like even cypherpunks really celebrated price movements but it wasn't like a Moon Lambo type price movement thing. It was like, it wasn't we're rich, it was like we're winning and they can't stop us, kind of. Whereas now I kind of feel like a lot of price movements tend to be more cynical on that, like look at how rich we are kind of thing. But yeah, so early crypto days nostalgia shall never go away.
But it just gets increasingly more mythologized, right? That's the funny part about it, right? Like you and I that were actually there, we have some sort of sense of how it was, and then over time, obviously, our own memory fog will set in and will make it seem a lot cooler than it was. But at the same time, all the people who weren't there becomes an increasingly bigger pool of people that it just becomes like facts in a history book. Like when it's 2020, then it's very cool to be like, wow, Bitcoin in 2010. But when it's 2030, Bitcoin in 2010 is like, yeah, this is some dusty old history. Like, okay, it was kind of cool. Every 10 years, the early history will become more of a sort of academic curiosity and less of like an idealized thing that we should still be striving to uphold or whatever. And just, yeah, that culture slowly dies out. What happens is people are much more interested in what's the utility and what's happening now over time.
Yeah, I have found that, like, I mean, obviously, knowledge is power. Knowledge is great, and being alive during a certain time is a certain amount of knowledge, and it's almost like I feel like I didn't have to do the same amount of research that people do today because I was just there during it. It's like I got free education, and it's funny because there's all these like young cypherpunks who were like mostly, let's say, Bitcoin and Monero people who were like nice people. We're talking about the good ones here, right? Nice people. They're idealistic. They care about cypherpunk stuff, and then they just don't understand the history. Like they don't understand the block size wars, what Bitcoin used to be like, what it is now. They don't understand stuff, and then like some kid was talking about like, oh my gosh, like it's got so bad today with all these like shit coins. Like back in the day, you didn't have anything like that. And I'm just like, and it was like,
Yes, he did.
And I was like, I remember I was there 10 years ago, right? And I remember, and actually like, it's like all shit coins like on Solana today. Back in the day, it wasn't. And so I sent him a 10-year-old video that's, do you want to trade some shit coins? That whole song, that one that I like to play a lot. And like literally an entire, and then you hear about like, they had like Tiger coin and
Peer
coin,
whatever, yeah.
just random shit coins. And then there was like a Ron Paul coin for a time, and there was like all this weird. It just was. They were shit coins. Like this, the true term. You hit a copy and paste. Somehow it's a proof of work blockchain, and people are mining this literal copy and paste of Bitcoin that most don't even change parameters like Litecoin did as far as like block time and stuff. And then they just like sell them, and then they go to zero, and they persist for a while because they're mined. Someone's mining them. And then I did see some where like the blocks like stopped going because no one mined them, and then like a month later some rando starts mining.
Someone guy's like, yeah, it's me.
It chugs again, and it's like, dude, like this is how is this better than like Hawk to a coin? It's the same thing.
It was
We've
more,
always been this
I guess. I don't know whether that's better or worse, but you had to be more aware of what was going on to be in the mix. I think that's where a lot of people really get cut up about like Hawk to a coin or whatever other scams, is because it's now big enough that it will get somebody involved who attracts the media, and then it becomes a big thing, and then loads of people get roped in who barely have any idea what's going on. And in the past, that was also how it happened with people buying Peercoin or whatever. But you had to be like in the fringe, at the far end of the bell curve, like the fringe 1% or less, much less actually, who were digging around in this shit. Like, kind of once you're out in the Wild West, like, all bets are off. You know, you're just responsible for yourself. But society sort of feels like for the middle part of the bell curve,
Yeah.
well, there's got to be some protections and stuff because most people are kind of clueless and don't know what's going on. And if they get wrecked, that's bad, and we should kind of coddle them, right? And you sort of forfeit that protection in society's mind the more you go to the extreme ends of like self-exploration. And then people are kind of like,
Absolutely.
well, you got wrecked in the Wild West, but you were in the Wild West, which you chose to be. So that was your fault.
That's a great segue to start the thing because this whole thing is on the Wild West. It's over now. Officially, as of this year, this is it. So let's hit the intro and get
We're
going.
mainstream.
Yep.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go. So welcome everyone. Hello, and this is the Digital Cash Rundown, episode 196, creeping up on that 200 mark. Been going a while. I'm joined by the one and only human being who's ever held the first name of Jeremy. How's it going, man?
The best. I say that like if I'm getting in an Uber and they're like, "Are you Jeremy?" and I'm like, the only one in the world. You've got the number one, the unique, the only one you'll ever have, and it often makes them laugh. So yeah, that's a good little gimmick you can run on your Uber drivers.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? First of all, have you tested that by culture, like as far as like where you are on the world, and do you get what are the responses like? Like I'm wondering if you go to some place like, let's just say like Norway or the Netherlands or something, you get like a really like dry kind of like oh, is this? I've heard of other Jeremy where you are not the only one, and like I wonder if you get like super literal people, or if they all kind of understand that it's a joke.
No, they kind of. I mean, it's like any joke. It's all in the way you tell it, right? I'm not coming in. I am not coming in with that dry humor either. You know, I'm very like happy and upbeat and energetic, and I'm clearly trying to have a laugh, right? So they always kind of get that. If I was Russian or something and I was trying to pull off like a deadpan dark humor style, then yeah, maybe I'd get those responses. But you get out the energy that you get back the energy that you put out. So I never really have a problem with people being like, I don't get it, because I'm clearly joking. I'm making it overly obvious. There's not like an intellectual barrier to getting with it.
Yes, although speaking of which, Russians are hilarious. Like if you get to know them a little bit, like there's just so much humor under that like deadpan, like complete serious, like it's something about. I think that if there's a person who's never had any struggle in their life, they don't tend to have a lot of humor. But anywhere there's struggle, people are hilarious, which maybe explains the Aussies, right? Just,
yeah, exactly.
Been sent to a complete wasteland to basically die for their crimes historically, and then it's just like, oh, these guys are kind of funny. This is great. Guess what we did.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an element of it. People have humor as a coping mechanism. But I also feel like the Australian attitude comes from the sun. It comes from the Australians expect things to be sunny and good outside most of the time, which is why we relate so strongly to people from Brazil, Thailand, and like Spain, south of Spain, or different, maybe even Italy, not so much. I don't know, Australians probably don't have the number, but all those countries that are like very sunny and very jovial in a way, the thing that they all share is the weather. So that's my biggest theory for why Australians are as happy and outgoing as they are.
Yeah, it's like fun Brits because you go to the UK and it's, the weather does get to you if you're there long enough, and it produces a certain, dry sense of humor that if you combine that with a jovial attitude from the sun, I don't know, kind of like, which would be fun to have like a poll about, statistically, which is the funniest culture in the world. I'm sure there'd be
that would be interesting. Yeah.
Funny Olympics.
That would be super cool, actually. Yeah. With
Yes.
each country voting on each other country, so then it would be one of
Hmm.
those cases where it would be fair. Like you couldn't vote for your own country's humor. You would have to vote for somebody else. And so then you'd kind of
Yeah.
cancel any bias.
Consensus. I mean, a Bitcoin Core could learn a thing or two,
Consensus.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's the way it is. All right. So let's get into shilling and then get into the stuff. So obviously, I have to talk about Coin ATM Radar, which is the sponsor of this podcast. Very grateful as always, because when buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting a random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could intends to freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you can find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy or sell cryptocurrencies for cash. And on their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying. And you can also search by geographical area, such as country, state, city. You can search the ATM in the funniest place on earth whenever you find where that is. And you can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. To find out more, go to coinatmradar.com, which is COINATMRADAR.com, which at some point I should get some sort of a song made about that. COINATM. Get a little, you do that for them. I
A
wonder.
jingle. That's what it is. You need a jingle.
Yes. I just play that instead of like talking all the time. But it is kind of funny. Like we're talking about those, with like the BCH bank run type things. It is so annoying to try to retrain the entire world. It's like, has everything on custodial exchanges. And just like, I think it's obviously a very valuable thing to do. But like, at least if you buy from an ATM, you don't have to like withdraw. You just get it, And I think if more people self-custodied, I think that the self-custody tools would be better too. It's not just like, write your seed phrase down somewhere. Speaking of which, that reminds me, the Stack Wallet. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, I know Stackwell. I've talked to the guys there. I went on their show. They have BCH, and they even have Cash Fusion. I believe they're the only mobile BCH supporting wallet to have Cash Fusion so far. Although, if I happen to be developing a wallet, I might also happen to know that there was more coming on that front. But that's speculation. Yeah. That's hypothetical.
I mean, if you were, I mean, you're kind of a podcast. You don't do wallets, so like,
yes.
But yeah, the Stack Wallet, great people. Love Diego. All of that team is great. The thing about the self custody though is, so just to test out Stack Wallet, I have a BCH wallet in there, and that's it, just to like try it out. The thing that they're very big on self-custody, but also user experience. And in some ways, they've made ways that have conflicted, where you can't. It's one of those wallets where, first of all, it's a multi-coin wallet where you have a different seed for every coin. And so if you have like 8 coins in there, you have to write down 8 different seeds, which is not ideal in my opinion. But also, when you create a new wallet, you have to write down the seed and then type it back in order to create the wallet. Like, they make you do that just like to make sure you've self-custody. But that just shut me out of actually using the wallet, because I remember one time I was in a conference in Dubai, and someone from the Epic Cash community came in, and they're like, "Oh, you should take some Epic Cash. It's some Mimble. It's so great." I'm like, "All right," and then their wallet wasn't working for some reason, or I don't know. They're like, "Oh no, it's in Stack. Use Stack," and I was trying to get the Stack wallet to receive this tip, and I couldn't, because they wanted me to write down my seed phrase like literally in a giant public place where everyone's looking at me, and I'm just like, I can't do this right now, and so I can't make a wallet to receive your stuff. So I guess no Epic Cash for me, So it's one of those things that, like, I get that you're trying to get people to self-custody, but it's a brick wall.
Yeah, I mean, in Selene, we have it that you can just get the money instantly, on the premise that if you're the kind of person who knows enough about crypto to be receiving some large amount of money immediately, then you probably know what you're doing. You're probably 99.9% of the time people are being onboarded with 10 cents or $1, not with like their life savings, right? So we just let that happen because, again, that initial first impression is just so important. And then, of course, as part of the onboarding, you explain to them, you've got to back up your seed phrase, etc. And then they forget, they don't do it, and then they come back to you later. I had this happen the other day, and somebody said to me, "Oh yeah, you know, you gave me that $1," and then I deleted it off my phone, and I said, "Did you write down the words?" And they said, "No," and I said, "I told you so," and they said, "Yeah, I remember that you did." And then I said, "Okay, well, that's fine. You know, I kind of expected that would happen, but next time, now you know." And they're like, "Oh yeah, shit, okay." And so that's just kind of how we got to teach people. You know, every kid needs to touch the hot stove to learn not to touch the hot stove once in their life. And it's the same thing with crypto seed phrases. But that said, there's a lot that we can and hopefully will do. We have a lot of plans to make that better. Like you can have a nag screen that gets increasingly more annoying as the amount of money goes up and things like that. Like what you're saying, that system works, or it would be good with tapping in the seed phrase and stuff. But what if it just only did that once you already had $100 or something like that? It would make a lot more sense, right?
I could see plenty of instances where that could be a problem too, where like you're like, all right, I'll do it later, and then when you finally hit a certain amount, it's like, now we won't let you go, and it just like you were trying to load up to go to a meetup, and you're like laid out the door, and now you're stuck with this bricked wallet. It's like the timing.
No, but it wouldn't be like that. It would just be like at first it just pops up, yeah, and there's a skip button. But then maybe once it's over a certain threshold, you have to skip, and then you have to type in "I want to skip" or something. You know, it just gets more and more annoying until it gets to you can always skip through it if you're absolutely, you know, in a rush. But at some point, it will be annoying enough, and you'll be looking at it at a time where you're like, "Let's just actually just fucking fix this."
Yes,
that's the idea.
I think that's the only way to do it for seed phrases. That's why I'm partial to those NFC wallet like tap thingies, because first of all, the setup is super easy, and people tend to value physical items more than like virtual items. Like they don't understand where their file storage is or anything. They don't understand that, but they understand this is the thing. It's in my other pocket, and like the amount of like losing physical items. People do lose physical items, but not the same rate. And I'm really let me give them actually a shout out here, just because. The amount of free publicity I give, like Coiny Team Raider should be jealous that they're the only ones paying for this. But there's this company called Burner, and I'm going to throw that up on the screen, burner.pro, and they make these NFC hardware wallets. It's meant to not be like super hardcore long-term secure storage. It's just like you tap a card to your phone, you add funds into it, and then that's it. And you can gift it to someone, right? Just like a card, give it to someone. I think some of these you can get for as low as like $10 USD per one. And they also have some NFC capabilities of you can like tap and pay with them like they're like a cash card or something like that. It's kind of interesting, but just kind of turning it to a physical item, which I think is kind of fun. So yeah, but anyway, we could probably go on that stuff forever. Let's talk about what everyone loves, which is sausage making, i.e. legislation. Everyone loves that stuff. So the U.S. House advances Crypto Genius Act, Clarity Act, and Anti-CBDC Act. And former Bitcoin Cash guy or Big Blocker, whatever you want to call him, Iman Gunsir of AVAX said, the all-at-once phase is beginning. So before chatting on that stuff, EGS was never actually like a BCH, or was he? He just was in the pro big block camp, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. I don't want to speak out of turn here. You know, I'm familiar with him as sort of a character among the cast of crypto characters, but I've never met him. I've never talked to him. I've not even really followed his tweets or anything like that. I know he did one interview with Hayden Otto a while ago where he was basically shilling what they were doing on Avalanche, and then Hayden like sort of called him out a little bit about they got into lawsuits for a little while about Avalanche, some scammy stuff or whatever, and then he just rage quits the interview. So that's about as much as I know about it. But what I do know is that, yeah, there was a lot of people that were sort of soft on the big block side. You know, they were kind of like BTC hardcore, BCH hardcore, and then there was some people who were like, well, big blocks is clearly the way, and I'm going to clearly be supporting big blocks, but also I'm not going to be in the thick of it, you know, building stuff for the BCH side, I'm just going to say I hope they win. And then when they didn't, they kind of floated off to different other various projects, like him with Avalanche, which I sort of am always wondering if at some stage those people will start kind of going, BCH is still looking good, you know, like, oh, look, it's still here. But we're not at that stage yet. It'll be a couple more years.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I do remember him being kind of in the big block ish camp, and then I do remember especially him being a critic of the toxic astroturfing campaigns that the small block camp employed, and like because I interviewed him for Cointelegraph many years ago about like the Dragon's Den and stuff like that because he was like openly calling out the troll room that they use to coordinate all these attacks and stuff.
Which they denied at the time, and then later got published in the big block, what's it called, the Block Size War book, and then everyone went, "Oh, of course that was happening," and it was like, well, in hindsight, you say, of course it was happening. At the time, you were trying to gaslight everyone that it wasn't happening.
Yeah, it's just so annoying and stuff. But anyway, so these three acts advance. Before we kind of go into too much of this stuff, do you have any kind of like hot takes on Crypto Week in the U.S. on all these bills kind of advancing through?
Yeah, well, the three titles I think already kind of tell you what you need to know because, like, the Clarity Act is almost certainly going to make things less clear. The Genius Act is almost certainly not going to be a Genius Act, and what's the other one? The Anti-CBDC Act is almost certainly going to be like CBDC facilitating. So you already know from the titles, like, kind of the direction the wind is blowing in, just with that heuristic. But actually, when you mentioned this to me, I hadn't been following it or heard about it all that much, which is rare because usually you and I are sort of on the same wavelength with regards to what's kind of circulating in the news. And so that stuck out to me because it means maybe one of two things. Like, on one hand, maybe it's that I am just becoming increasingly cloistered in my little section of BCH and cryptocurrency, and I've stopped kind of giving a shit about what's happening, or maybe it's just that this stuff is moving out of my vision. It's not that I'm becoming more closed, it's that the relevance of this stuff is fading off to some other people in some other place. Whoever it is that is battling over crypto legislation has nothing to do with what you and I do every day, trying to spread peer-to-peer cash adoption. And I actually think that's a good thing. I'm totally for that. It's kind of like, if the people on both sides of that issue want to fight about it somewhere else, then that just leaves me free to crack on with what I'm doing. So I'm not mad about that. That's great.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, it seems like some of the most impactful things happen kind of very quietly. Like, as far as like, this is an innovation that comes out that's super important and like no one cares other than the 5 people paying attention at the time, or you have something where someone screws us down the road. And there's a lot of basically the kind of overview, and I don't know how many other countries have like Europe's Mika kind of overhaul has been something that got a lot of attention, of course, because it was a very comprehensive reform thing that gave a lot of clarity and also did a lot of dumb things too. But, you know, what do you expect the government, especially Europe, especially the Euro poors, you know, what do you expect them to do, right? But basically there was almost nothing in the U.S. as far as crypto regulation up until like now, and pretty much people did what they want, but then also like were scared of being like shut down if they did things too bad or whatever. And in the last administration really started to crack down, just sending the SEC to just cause as much carnage as possible. And I think that there were some like leaked conversations or memos or whatever that kind of did even say that that was sort of the goal. Like, they weren't trying to regulate, they were trying to just cause as much harm to the industry as possible. Like, literally, that was their goal. That sucked. When we have the new administration, then we have that kind of gets called off, where Ross Ulbricht gets freed like day 1.5, whatever you want to call that. And then the SEC just starts dropping all these lawsuits. And it's just like, okay, well, this is great. But now we're back to still that uneasiness part. So now you have laws coming through to actually say, without a shadow of a doubt, where things stand. And so that's where like this is what crypto in the U.S. is going to look like. is this stuff? So let me look at these things real quick. So the Genius Act is what got most of this kind of attention because it gives like a stable coin framework as far as like what is a stable coin and what can and can't be a stable coin. And if it adds a whole lot more restrictions as far as, you know, a lot of stuff that makes sense as far as like if I was going to use a centralized stable coin, like a company issued one, I would kind of want some of these things. Like, for example, it has to be fully backed by dollars or dollar equivalents, and they have to have like regular like monthly audits or something like that. And then there's a few other things. It's like, oh, that sounds great. But first of all, a couple of things with that are, first of all, the biggest stablecoin by, you know, a landslide is Tether, and Tether does not apply. Like the Tether does not qualify according to that because they're maybe not fully. I mean, everyone kind of knows they're not fully backed by dollars or dollar equivalents, and they definitely have not been audited. So I don't know.
Well, they did get audited and then failed, right, with the New York Attorney Generals, or was that technically not an audit? Was that there was technically an attestation or something like that? I can't remember the
I
details.
think they've never had an actual full audit. Like, I'm pretty sure, unless it happened in the last year, and it went completely under the rug. But like, I'm pretty sure they've had, like, you know, they've had concepts like there's a time when in some debate when they're asking Trump, what does his plan of? Says, do you know? And he says, I have concepts of a plan. It's like there have been concepts of an audit, but they've never had like an audit, as far as I know. And so, what do you think is going to happen with Tether in this situation? Do you think they're going to get like just pushed out of the U.S. market, and it's going to be like USDC on the streets, Tether in the sheets kind of thing, or like, you know, tomato and potato Europe. Tomato Europe's going to be Tether, and potato Europe's going to be USDC. Like, is it just going to be the global South uses them, and then, or do you think they're going to clean up their act and become like another USDC? Or option 3, do you think they're just going to get nuked?
Well, I don't think probably any of those. I don't think they're going to clean up their act. That's definitely not going to happen. Why? Why would they do that? Clearly, it's already just a shady as shit type of situation all the way around. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely that option's out. Are they going to just fall apart under some kind of government pressure or new regulations or whatever? Also, probably no. The fact that they've got as far as they have strongly indicates that they are actually backed by some parts of the government, which will no doubt pull some strings to keep them alive as long as that benefits them. So that's not going to happen either. I kind of think it's the other way around. I think it's sort of like, if history has taught us anything, it's don't bet against Tether. Don't bet that Tether's going to fall apart. Actually, things might just keep somehow working out. It's actually crazy, even just on the surface. Like whatever they are now, this $140 billion or whatever of Tether stable coins that are out there that they just churn out constantly. They are, at least, you know, supposedly this company of literally like 5 or 10 people with the highest profitability per employee of any company doing anything anywhere in the world, with more than like, well, even against other companies that are 5 people startups and raise like 10 million in VC, they're still more profitable than those guys because they're just printing money from buying these US treasuries. And I don't even know how any of that system works. Like, you can't just get access to buying US treasuries. You have to be pretty involved in the swamp of what's all happening. So, like, it's the whole thing is such a shady operation that I definitely do not bet against them. I think even if these laws technically would be a problem for them, there'll be excuses, there'll be a lack of enforcement, and they'll probably just carry on as they have been, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation where you could see it as like a thing that puts USDC at the top and kind of knocks Tether down a peg or makes them kind of do things differently. The one thing that's kind of interesting about this whole act, right, is as a consequence of the way they do things, there's two obvious things. One, there is no like loophole for a legal, the able to issue legal decentralized stablecoin. Like it just these are stable coins. They have to be XYZ. And that's I think there's going to be a lot of legal gray area around this in the future. But basically, if you have an over collateralized stablecoin with some crypto or an algo stable, that's not now going to be a stablecoin legally.
It's not a recognized stablecoin, basically, because
yeah.
everyone will still call them because they still are stablecoins in a sense, but it maybe just doesn't fall under the framework.
So I wonder what the implications of that will be, right? Like, does that mean that those things kind of go to zero and people don't use them anymore? Does that mean that they won't be allowed to be used? Like, will some non-custodial wallets be like, oh, if we were doing business in the US, we're not going to even allow you to use like DAI or something? Is it going to be like that? Or is it just going to be whatever's considered a stablecoin for regulatory purposes, which means are accepted to pay like US taxes and debts and stuff, that you will be able to use USDC and stuff like that, but you will not be able to use DAI there? Like what I really want to know is how the decentralized stablecoin side of things actually interacts in the real world now.
Well, what's going to happen is the same thing that already happened with the existing centralized stablecoins, which is that Tether and Circle and whoever else got cracking, and they were kind of in a gray area, and there was a lot of back and forth behind the scenes. But year after year after year after year, they just kept growing and growing and growing and becoming more useful and more important to everything that was going on. And now here we are in 2025 with the sort of capitulation from the regulators being like, okay, we cannot A, ignore this any longer, and B, we also can't just ban it or outlaw it because there's way too many people who are way too involved in it. So we just have to make some semi-reasonable framework of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with the decentralized stablecoins. The centralized stablecoins will probably carry on as they are, but the decentralized ones will keep growing and growing and growing because now they're the ones operating in the gray area that's a bit more frictionless, a bit more free of government interference. You can just plug it into old DeFi, which is exploding and going to keep exploding. And eventually that will get to a point that it will be the same as the centralized stablecoin. So it just might be in 5 years from now, they'll just put another line in the regulation saying like, okay, well, we originally didn't recognize decentralized stablecoins, but now we do, and they kind of fall under the same as the centralized ones or something like that. That's what'll happen.
Yeah, I do think that it's definitely going to bifurcate the stablecoin idea into two things, where there's the one which is considered like neo-fiat, and then the other one which is sort of like a DeFi price pegging mechanism, you know? It's just going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens and exactly what happens when people start trying to use one as the other. And it'll be fun to see. It is also interesting because on the DeFi side of things, do you know what chain flip is? Have you heard of that term, that project? No. It's kind of the third big cross-chain AMM DEX. It's Thorchain, then Maya Protocol, then chain flip. And one thing that chain flip does differently is their dual asset liquidity pools are the asset and USDC. They're not like the Thorchain has the Rune token, Maya Protocol is Cacao. This is their dual asset with a stablecoin, which makes them less volatile, of course, which is great. But USDC is not like a fully permissionless thing. So I wonder what happens if, like, let's say like
regulators just freeze their pool and they're fucked.
Yeah, or like they already have on the protocol level when the North Korean hackers got at Bybit and stuff, and that was all going through a whole bunch of these cross-chain things because people wanted BTC instead of ETH for some reason. They went on the way through. I think Chainflip at the protocol level managed to block the flows, whereas a lot of Thorchain interfaces blocked flows, but on the protocol level, it's decentralized. You can just kind of do it, and so they've already kind of blocked trades. So I guess if you are a USD, a centralized stablecoin reliant DeFi protocol, you're not DeFi. You're CeFi at this point, kind of. So there's that kind of thing. Let me throw this post up on the screen that talks a little bit about this, about basically the criticism of this is the legislation would allow government to freeze or block digital funds of any individual deemed in violation of federal state agency rules, including executive mandates like previous vaccine requirements. This is what some of the critics say. So they're saying like, oh, this establishes like a CBDC kind of thing, which, yeah, kind of, right? But where I fail to, I guess, freak out so much about this is I kind of already assumed that was what you could do with stablecoins. They're centrally issued anyway. Like, I kind of thought like, okay, well, can they be surveilled and censored? I mean, aren't they already being surveilled and censored? Like, does the act that mandates this do anything different? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But one other thing that I think was mentioned, I forget who, but basically the big reason this is like the number one bill of all these bills, the biggest priority for people who are pushing this stuff, because it's kind of the way the banks get to stay banks in this new crypto world, and the way the dollar gets to stay the dollar, because if they could be backed by dollar or dollar equivalents, that means treasuries. That means every stable coin is going to be backed by treasuries. So then someone's buying all that U.S. debt. So it could be just a way of getting everything to limp along like that.
Yeah, of course. But I think the key point is the law trundles along behind the culture, which trundles along behind the technology and the economics, right? Or the technology first, then the economics, then the culture, then the politics, then the law, right? So in this case, like you were saying before, if there's kind of a split between the stablecoin centralized version and the stablecoin decentralized version, that's really just crypto technology is just always one step ahead of the game, right? That's the whole point. By the time like people were issuing centralized stablecoins when the regulators were in a panic and didn't know what to do about it, and et cetera, et cetera. And then before they'd got around to solving that problem, people had already made decentralized stablecoins and then innovated them a few iterations. And then by the time they get around to regulating or being involved in that, there will be the next thing, which will be, quantum stable coin. So I don't know, whatever it will be, like something else, something new that they didn't see coming.
Quantum stable
to stay ahead of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking the Don Draper meme, where he's like pitching it with the stable coins, but they're quantum.
Yeah, quantum stable coins. That is a funny that would be a funny X handle as well. Quantum stablecoin, just doing stuff. But so throwing this thing by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who people in the U.S. know that she's
always getting in the mix. What is her claim to fame? I know she's in politics, but she seems to just stick her opinion into any and every single topic. Obviously she can't be an expert in everything, but she always is in there somehow giving some hot take.
She's everyone's conspiracy Facebook mom is kind of her thing. And this is funny because she says about the Genius Act. I will not vote for this. The only way to guarantee a ban on central bank digital currency is through law. The Genius Act does not ban CBDC or maintain people's chain of custody. Revelations 13:16 through 17. Then she does the whole mark of the beast thing from the Bible. I'm just like, oh, okay. Listen, I don't disagree. It's just she's got to approach it from a crazy lady standpoint kind of thing. But basically, then there's the other act that kind of I guess makes people a little bit more palatable to vote for the CBDC for the stablecoin one is this anti-CBDC bill, which basically prohibits the Federal Reserve from issuing a central bank digital currency. And it's one of those weird things where CBDCs are super, the big picture concept is super well understood, but what qualifies as a CBDC and what doesn't is no one knows. And so they're oh, stable coins USDC is a CBDC. It's well, no, it's not technically, but kind of it is technically. So, I mean, if you have a stablecoin like that, like if you have a centralized stablecoin, that could be considered a CBDC because it's a central bank issued currency, the US dollar, and it's digital. And all the bad stuff you think about it, which is you can surveil it, super obvious. You can censor it, super obvious. So we're already there, CBDC, right? But it's not also USDC and Tether are not issued by the federal government. They're not centrally controlled and tracked and censored by the central bank directly, even though the government can just say censor this. So it's like they're kind of definitely not a CBDC and definitely are at the same time. Schrodinger CBDC, you know? So like, I don't get what you do if you ban CBDCs in this law and like, okay, we're fine. Like, what
It's all just theater. But that's why it's good. I mean, I take it as a win, even the fact it's stupid, but even in as far as they're putting out laws called the anti-CBDC law or whatever, whether or not the law is or is not facilitating CBDCs, which in almost all certainty it's going to end up doing, right? They're not actually going to stop doing CBDCs. It doesn't matter what law. That's the whole point of like Marjorie Taylor Greene. If she's saying, "Oh, we need to have laws to ban this," that's just where politicians just don't get crypto, which is that the ethos is not "don't be evil," it's "can't be evil" as much as possible, right? And so the law and all the politics and regulating, that's only like that doesn't matter in a certain sense. Like we're just going to ignore that and just keep building technology that you can't argue with, right? So in that sense, the anti-CBDC law is a good thing, just because the fact that the law says anti-CBDC means that somewhere in the huge swamp there is enough momentum on this idea CBDC bad, and that kind of means that crypto is winning the narrative war.
Yeah.
Much aside from anything else, you know?
Well, just like Ross Ulbricht was a narrative war win, because in the grand modern scheme of things, like, and you got to be careful the way I express this, but he did not necessarily matter. Like the crypto world was moving on without that, and also the government, like no one on either side of the government had to care. But then he was such a meme to early crypto people that he became this legendary status in the crypto stuff. So it was like a super symbolic victory to get him out. And of course, you know, people who know like Lynn and stuff like that, you know he's a fantastic person and innocent and all this other great stuff. Like from a human level, absolutely. But like that victory was like that a super big like sign that like, oh my gosh, we're back kind of thing. And so it's the same thing if you ban CBDCs. Doesn't materially mean a lot, but it does signal kind of a shift in the right direction.
Yeah, and that matters because then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Those symbolic wins turn into real wins. That's why it's so important. It's because even if, like crypto has to get very good at, and I think generally most people are actually, who are fairly prominent in the space, are good at trying to take symbolic wins wherever you can. Because the cynical view is, oh, well, it's just a symbolic win. It didn't really change anything. But the fact is, real change comes from a lot of symbolic wins adding up to a change in public perception or the knock-on effect of people changing their opinion, which influences the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it's kind of like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That same kind of like win a battle of inches, you know, kind of concept. And I think crypto seems to be doing well-ish at that in the year 2025.
Yes. And it's kind of interesting how now we go into the Clarity Act thing, which the Clarity Act basically seeks to, for once and for all, decide which entities the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, regulate. So that was like the big crypto boogeyman for years in the U.S. was the SEC, because even before they start suing everyone and everything, people were saying if it's a centralized coin, it's a security. You're doing an investment contract, therefore you have to like register as a securities, broker and everything. So basically what this act does is it sort of separates crypto into two things, securities and commodities, where securities are, it's like an investment contract, like a company issuing an investment share, whereas a commodity is just like digital gold or whatever. It's a thing, and they have a, and I do have to reread this because I saw the beginnings of this act like last year, like I think even before the election concluded, and basically, or it was more than that, but basically, from my understanding, and I'm kind of gleaning this from reading some stuff, and of course, I will actually read the law and publish a big breakdown at some point, a little bit more, a little bit more formally. But it seems like the criteria have a lot to do with centralized, like consensus and governance mechanisms versus decentralized, and token allocation. So basically, people would say that Bitcoin, because it's anyone can mine, and the hash rate is distributed around the world by many parties, and the supply is well distributed, and there's no central actor that can make any kind of significant changes, that would be considered a commodity. Whereas XRP, Ripple, is a giant chunk of the supply is held by a company, and the company issues the validator list that all the validators are on, that if you don't have the same validator list of approved validators, you kind of fork off to a different version of the ledger. So it's basically controlled by a company. So therefore, it seems like that would say that XRP would be a security according to this. Now, I don't know. Like, we'll see. I'm just throwing that up on the screen there, where this guy called Cardano Yoda, I have no idea which blockchain he might be into, has this kind of thing, this where he kind of breaks down about the likely mature or likely not mature kind of thing, where they say, like Tron is founder dominated governance and high insider ownership, so probably not. So could be kind of interesting. What are your hot takes on that?
Well, the number one thing that I care about is, of course, Bitcoin Cash. I'm super biased in that way. And so I'm not too stressed about any of this commodity or security type of regulations, because BTC, as a result of a bit of reality, but mostly its immense size and clout and lobbying power, is going to end up on whatever is the best basically category, and then the rest of the market gets kind of split up as to whether they can get into that same category or whether they're in another one. But BCH of course has the Bitcoin Genesis, the Bitcoin initial supply, Bitcoin mining. For all those reasons, it's basically just going to be put in the same category as BTC. So one of the many things that I love about BCH is, of course, that we have that perpetual protection of the sort of larger BTC efforts in terms of legislation and lobbying and all that stuff. And we don't have to put any effort into it. It just happens by default. So that's a win as far as BCH goes. And I'm sure if BTC is a commodity and being a commodity is better, we will be too. But the other ones, I mean, it makes sort of, it seems like the truth wins eventually. Truth doesn't rust. So it seems like if you and I were here talking about this 3 or 4 years ago, which we basically were, with Gary Gensler or whatever making a huge mess of it, we would have said something like, why don't you just make it into who are the ones that basically obviously have a centralized foundation, like whoever, Tether, Cardano, Ripple, even Ethereum I would put in that bucket. But of course, Ethereum people would squawk that was not fair. But basically you would say, okay, all the ones with this foundation, they're all, or if they're either proof of stake with a big pre-mine, or they have a foundation, okay, it's basically security, or somebody's trying to obviously profit off that as an investment. And if it's proof of work and has been around a long time, then, it's probably kind of a commodity. And it feels like that's the direction things are going in. So over time, sort of reason is winning out, I feel, just very, very slowly.
Yeah. When looking at the first drafts of this law, I did not find anything immediately objectionable, other than it's a law telling me how I can and can't use my crypto, so fuck off. So other than that, which is my number one thing I always think of, it is kind of interesting because there were there were some sort of investment tokens and things like that that would give you a share of protocol revenue and stuff, which were kind of universally thought to be a security. And like the Maya protocol had something like that, and they kind of said like there's probably security, but we don't care because we're not doxxed and we're in Mexico, so haha. And now Thorchain has a similar thing, and they're a lot more U.S. based as far as like the development teams and stuff. But then now maybe they don't have to be a security if the protocol itself is considered decentralized enough. So I'll have to do a big deep dive on that. So I in the last 5 minutes, because I have a call in like 6 minutes. Let's kind of just briefly touch on this glorious meme, because you sent it to me and I didn't want to. I didn't want it to go to waste. So it's just people around the dinner table looking up, saying, "Why don't you come downstairs and tell everyone about your amazing dev skills?" It's just a gross, creepy looking dude upstairs. So will you explain this meme real quick for the viewers at home?
Well, I mean, you might even be better able to explain it than me, but basically there was somebody, I said the other day, I made some comment on Twitter about talking about how BCH had rejected the XCC devs, and it had also rejected the BSV people, and so it's basically the only cryptocurrency that has proven that it can resist a hijacking, right? And a couple of the XCC people started quote tweeting that, which I didn't even see because I have them all muted basically. And they just had a whinge about that and how BCH is, failing. And so they just constantly, like, it's just cope. They just complain about BCH sucks. Meanwhile, they're rank 138 and we've climbed back into the top 20 and almost, reached up close to being in the top 10 while our community is great. Upgrades are rolling out. Everything's going smoothly. So they're obviously struggling to accept, like, we were wrong on a number of things. But their main cope is we had all the better devs. Like, it's so stupid to kick out all the quote unquote best devs. And it's kind of like, well, that's not even true, like, at all. But even if it was, even if in a hypothetical universe it was that whoever is involved in XCC with these top tier devs that BCH couldn't afford to miss. Well, the fact of the matter is, being the best devs doesn't carry the day. It's good, it's helpful if you have good devs, but it's not what makes the difference. Like, the same way you can have the best engineers in the world doesn't mean your startup's going to be successful, because you've also got to have marketing and etc. And it's the same in cryptos. So good luck with
the thing about this, guys. Is first of all, the thing that irked me was the phrasing of it was you kicked out all the smartest people in the room, which this is like, I'm going to be nice about everything else. This is the one thing I won't be nice in. I've never heard a smart person use the term smartest people in the room. I've just never heard it happen. And so this is, it's just my nitpick on that one thing that just like triggered my fringe autism or whatever. It's just, but basically seems like there is a strong argument that the smartest and best devs were kicked out of the project and are now in eCash instead of Bitcoin Cash.
There's no strong argument for that, but they believe that. They want to believe that
that's the line.
Exactly.
So that's the line, and I'm completely willing to believe it, by the way. It doesn't mean I do, but I'm willing to. But I kind of asked a few follow-up questions as far as like, what's the evidence? And I haven't found a lot of good evidence. Like, it's like someone was saying, "Oh, Amari's got a good economics background and stuff like that. He has good economic principles behind that." I'm like, fair enough, sure. What's the result of that? And it's like, are you saying that there's an economic, like, tokenomic system in eCash that's built out better and more soundly for the long run? Is there? I just haven't heard the follow up. Or, oh, we built out, and then as far as like what has been built, it would be. Like, this is something that like doesn't matter at all and is interesting at the same time. Like, because it's just like a dumb sort of pissing contest between two projects that kind of went their separate ways a long time ago. And
but that's the funniest part about this, is that none of the BCH people were even getting involved. I don't have time for this. Everyone else doesn't have time for this. You have time for this. You're the one arguing with them about it because you're still interested in these little minutiae, ego games or whatever. But BCH is past this. It's been 5 years, guys. Like, if your project is so great, go off, make it a success, and prove us wrong. But as you just continue crashing down the market cap, whining about our tweaks, that's never going to work, and we don't care. So
Yeah.
good luck with that, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of just it is from that perspective. It doesn't matter at all. But just from an intellectual curiosity standpoint, I would at some point want to just evaluate the dev funding that it's got, like the number of devs and the funding they've gotten of two projects over that period of time, and then evaluate the deliverables. Just say this is what they got, this is what these guys got, and then just see like which dev output has been more significant. Of course, you could always argue, well, our thing is smart, we don't like that thing. That thing is okay, that's off. That who cares? But just as far as like interesting dev outputs, like because of course you could output the best tech and just not have it go anywhere. But at least you produced a lot, and so it'd be interesting to sort of evaluate that kind of thing. And with that,
BCH has been shipping all the time. I don't know.
Yes.
We got to wrap up. But,
yes, we got to wrap up. Follow the BCH podcast on X, and you just had an episode, right?
Yeah. We just had one with Jomar. It was really good, actually. You can find out what's the latest stuff shipping on BCH right now. You can also go to minisatoshi.cash if you're interested in all the BCH upgrades, and I put out loads of stuff on the show, so just look into it if you want to know what's been happening.
Perfect. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Start living on crypto. Taxation is theft. All that good stuff. I'll see you around. Bye-bye.